Welcome to Therapeutic Momentum. We take you on an inspiring journey, spanning breakthroughs in science and medicine development. Over the last century, our average life expectancy has increased by more than 20 years. Join us as we go behind the scenes with medical researchers, clinical developers, and other experts working together in the race to tackle life-altering diseases with new treatments and cures.
I'm Karen Akinsanya. I'm a translational scientist working at the intersection between biomedical research and emerging technology. Thanks for tuning in to Therapeutic Momentum. Let's get started. Today I'm joined by Kate Haviland, who most recently served as president and CEO of Blueprint Medicines, guiding it from a clinical stage company through a fully integrated commercial business, and then ultimately through its roughly $9.5 billion acquisition by Sanofi in 2025. Over a 20-year career spanning Genzyme, PTC Therapeutics, Sarepta, Idera, and Blueprint, Kate has built a reputation for bridging rigorous science with sharp business instincts. When I asked Kate for a book recommendation, she chose Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma. This book profiles great companies who fail, not because they lack vision or discipline, but because their own success leaves them unable to disrupt themselves before others do. Kate told me this idea resonates deeply when she thinks about building biotech companies. In her words, instead of protecting the success we've had, we need to have the courage to disrupt ourselves. That sentiment resonates very strongly with me as well, and I think you'll hear part of that philosophy come through in every part of our conversation today. Good morning, Kate. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
I have as well. Thank you so much, Karen, for inviting me to the podcast, and I'm just thrilled to be here.
Well, we have a lot to cover today. Okay. You have an exciting story, I think, not just recently, but from the beginning. And I like to start at the beginning. Maybe you can take us all the way back to how you entered the industry, even before that, if you'd like. So sure. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, it's just been amazing to be part of this industry now for 20 years, which it even shocks me a little bit. You know, I was always interested in life sciences, and I was interested even when I was in high school. When I went to college, I was set out to go towards medical school and potentially do research and do like an MD, PhD. I had two uncles who were very kind of formative for me, one who was a hematologist, oncologist, and one who was a medical geneticist, both of whom did research as well as cared for patients. And so that was kind of the path I was on. And I got to university. I got a great role as a research student in a yeast genetics lab. I was really excited about it. Got in there, started doing it, and realized that I was a terrible bench scientist. And I tell this story because I always say to folks who are kind of coming up in their career, it's just as important to figure out what you're not good at and what you don't like, even if you have a preconceived notion that something's going to be perfect for you.
Right.
And to constantly be checking with yourself to say, am I good at this? Is this exciting to me or not? And so and that was a really interesting moment for me as a young person to say, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I love science and I love medicine, and what else is out there? And at that time, at my university and I think others, this idea of biotechnology or drug discovery and development was not really something that we talked about or that felt like a path. And so it was somewhat of an unknown. And so what I did is I kind of pivoted, and I was a biochemistry major, but I added on an economics major, and I did a dual major. And that was very much because I had a professor who said, hey, listen, we need people who can help bridge the economics and business and thoughts around that with really great science. And so I feel like I still feel indebted to her in many ways in terms of her just kind of planting that seed in my mind. Left college, went on to do kind of life sciences consulting, went back and got my MBA, and with the goal of really transitioning to being part of building innovative companies. And so I came out of that program and joined at the time Genzyme. And I, as many MBAs do, kind of came in through corporate development and started working on strategic transactions, which I found that I loved and has been part of kind of my career ever since. And so had a great experience at that company, really got a good sense of a culture that was very thriving, incredibly patient-centric, really lived the values that were kind of hung on the wall. And that was very was a very defining time for me in terms of my first company that I really worked at that was not a professional services organization. And so from there, I ended up kind of getting a role at an innovative biotech company in New Jersey called PTC Therapeutics. Still exists. Yeah, it still does quite a bit of work, but they were very early in their life cycle and had just started to think about moving from being a discovery into a development stage company with their first, at the time, investigational medicine, which is now Translarna, but it was Adalurin. And I had gotten to know that team through Genzyme and through my work in corporate development. And we had really liked the science, and we had tried to figure out ways to potentially partner with them. And at the time, Stu Peltz, who was the founder and CEO for many years and just an incredible person, called me and said, we need someone with rare disease experience. We think we have something we want to move into the clinic. Would you ever kind of consider coming to PTC? And so I kind of drove down to New Jersey and went to this kind of office park off a highway after being here in Kendall Square and Genzyme Center. And I got really excited about the opportunity to be part of a really fast-growing company, to be able to do a lot of different things. I didn't have a job description. Stu and I met, and I was going to be working directly for him on kind of anything and everything that came our way. And he agreed that I could go to board meetings and I could go to FDA meetings. And so I could get a really great visibility and experience across multiple things. And that became very appealing to me. It was certainly a risk. I was here in Boston. My partner and he and I had just bought our first apartment here in Boston. We just closed on it. And I decided to take this leap and jump and go work for PTC. And I think it's probably a defining moment in my career.
So were you commuting or you moved to New Jersey?
I actually moved to New York City. So we closed on our apartment and put half of our belongings here in Boston. And I moved half to a rented apartment in New York City and started working for PTC. And so it was not what I was expecting, not what I was planning. But when the opportunity presented itself, I decided that it was worth going for. And so I kind of took that leap and disrupted my life in many ways. And then I was at PTC for 6 years and had a really tremendous experience.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So early on,
Yes.
a lot of people these days are talking about being bilingual.
Yes.
Early on for you, you ended up being bilingual in economics and biochemistry.
Yes.
And then later on, it sounds like you also took an opportunity to essentially build out the T. I know there's a lot of people talking about this right now, and I would say that a lot of folks that I come across have chosen not to be a sort of singular domain expert, but have already in their career early on decided that they were going to pursue multiple different avenues. Can you say more about that and how you think that's set you up for the roles that you've actually ended up taking?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that was really what was appealing to me about PTC, was the idea that I could get more breadth rather than continue to go deep, be that in corporate development transactions. And actually, at that point, I'd actually moved into a different role at Genzyme, where I was in more of an inline program management marketing role. But I felt that the opportunity to be in a place where you could do a lot of different things. And listen, I think there's numerous paths. I think I have colleagues who I think got to a similar place that I have in my career by being really deep in an area for a while and then eventually kind of broadening out. And so I think I don't think there's one right path, but for me, what energized me and made me excited and really kind of made me feel invested in what I was doing was that idea of seeing how the pieces fit together and be able to see many different aspects of our really complex business, right?
It certainly is complex.
Yes.
There's so many pieces to this value chain, right?
Exactly. And and I feel like it made me earlier in my career than maybe I expected, be able to ask better questions, be able to understand and be empathetic to different parts of the business, whether that's people who are in CMC and manufacturing and supply chain, or people who are working to kind of do market development, or our colleagues who are in the lab really driving very innovative science and what that takes to do that. And I had a much more personal experience understanding some of those roles, even though I did not do them myself necessarily. And I feel like in many ways that helped me kind of maybe increase my own aperture, but also my ability to understand what different people in different parts of the organization may be struggling with, the opportunities they have, and how the pieces fit together. So In our business, when you push in one place, it automatically pops somewhere else. And you kind of have to, I think, as you get more and more senior and as you become more of a leader of teams and of companies, having an instinct around that, I think, becomes really valuable. And it enables you, I think, to drive better execution when you know a little bit about how all those pieces fit together.
And so let's talk about team.
Yeah. Yes.
So we started talking about you and your sort of career trajectory. A lot of this industry requires wrangling huge teams,
Yes.
whether they're your teams, whether you're an independent contributor or a leader or a team member, right? This is a team sport.
Very much so.
So let's talk about team, how that has evolved for you over your career, any special approaches that you have to building, maintaining, and driving awesome teams.
Yes, I mean, I really think one of the critical areas for me that I had to learn was how to build an incredible team. Because if you can't build great teams, you can't scale organizations, right? So to your point, our business is very much based on teams and people from different functions coming together and working collaboratively to kind of move through what is a complex process. As we all know, we often fail more than we succeed in this business. We work in an environment where you always have imperfect information. It's incredibly dynamic. You get data all the time inside your company. There's a lot going out outside that impacts our industry, our business, our companies, our programs. So it's dynamic and there's tremendous amounts of ambiguity. And I think in that environment, in order to succeed, what you need is a great group of people who bring different perspectives around a table, where there's an open environment where you debate the different opportunities to move things forward, to address issues, to go after opportunities. And through that debate, you get to the best result or the best answer, and you move forward. And then you pivot. And you have to constantly do this over and over again, day after day after day.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, at least for me, and I've seen this with some of my colleagues, is what gets us to a place where we start having that role of hiring a team, leading a team, managing a team, and makes us successful to get into those roles is not what then makes you good at managing a team. Like often you're an individual contributor. You have an expertise that you bring to the table. You're a member of those teams and you have to learn to collaborate. You have to learn to listen to your colleagues, to be open-minded, to value perspectives around you. You need to learn all those things as a team member. And I'd say as a team leader, I think what you need to learn is how to, I would say, I guess a shorthand way of saying it is provide guardrails, but not checklists. Right? You need to provide a view or a vision or a strategy, but enable the people who are working on your team to do things their way and to be accountable and have ownership around it, because that will make them then kind of gain those same skills, but it also enables them to drive the business, to deal with the ambiguity, to pivot when there's new information. If you give people checklists, they don't own it. They look for you to come back if one of the criteria on the checklist changes.
Right.
And so I think it becomes really critical to learn how to do that. And as I said, that's a big step in your career. And I think you have to be intentional and you need to be supported. And there are times when I've had colleagues who, and team members who get executive coaching. I've gotten executive coaching. This was a time for me when I went from a kind of a senior director to a vice president, where I got executive coaching to kind of think about and be really intentional about my thought process on what is going to make me successful in the next leg of the journey, which was different than what got me to that point.
Yeah.
And so I really do think that idea of what's your philosophy around a team, and also think about your own work experience. Earlier in my career, I worked for people and on teams that had maybe a different set of ways of operating that I didn't feel was as constructive. You know, some folks who maybe valued loyalty over ability, or valued kind of adherence to their perspective or viewpoint over debate and discussion.
Right.
And when you see that, or you can see what happens in a team when it's run that way, and then you can feel what happens in a team when it's more of an empowered group of people who are really looking for the best kind of next step in a program or a process or a business issue. So,
but it's interesting what you said. There's many paths, right?
Yes.
You don't have to have one experience or another to sort of end up in a certain role. But I think what you just said there is also very interesting, is that being on different kinds of teams, actually watching how it works or doesn't work is all formative, right? I think often early career folks may think that there is a perfect out there.
Yeah.
And there really isn't. I think you've said that a couple of times on in this discussion already. And actually working on dysfunctional teams can teach you a lot, I think, about how perhaps you might do things differently or adjust.
Very much so. I actually, and I say this, being earlier in my career in some of these types of environments or cultures or contexts, I actually think seeing something that you think is not constructive or does not get the best out of people or does not kind of make a team bigger, more than the sum of its parts, I feel like I learned more sometimes from those situations than I did from when things were going really well.
Yes.
And so you start to learn that, at least for me, leadership is not hierarchy. And people don't respond well and bring their kind of best efforts and do the best work when those environments, I think, exist. And I saw that firsthand, and I felt myself in it. And so I think those moments, and this is where I say, like, always checking in with yourself to say, and watching some of these things, not just doing the work, but experiencing it as you grow in your own career, to think, what am I going to bring with me from this? And what am I going to intentionally leave behind?
Right.
As I think about my next steps and how I even felt in those moments and how I could contribute. I say, like, being in environments where you're dealing with a lot of kind of internal, maybe politics or dynamics or whatever it may be, I have a huge capacity for work. I love the work we do. I'm passionate about it. I love working on great teams. And I realized for myself in that environment, I'd be so tired at the end of the day because it's a different type of energy.
It is.
And I think it really does kind of suck that kind of passion and energy out from individuals.
Yeah.
And if you do that to many individuals, you will never be more than the sum of your parts. And I just feel like my experience at Blueprint Medicines, we were never perfect. We were always evolving. We were always working on things. But man, we had a great culture. And our teams were more than the sum of their parts on a regular basis. And that's why we were able to go after opportunities that we didn't originally conceive. We were able to weather failures. We were able to adjust to external dynamics and figure out how to continue to find our path forward on our mission to really help patients. And I attribute a lot of that to our culture and our intentionality around that, and the fact that we were able to get great people and let them do amazing work and continue to innovate. So
yeah. So let's talk about Blueprint.
Yes.
I think that Blueprint's probably one of the most exciting transactions of the last couple of years. Maybe you can take us back. Well, congrats.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginning.
Yes.
So you talked about PTC.
Yes.
You were in New Jersey. How did you get to Blueprint? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I was at PTC for 6 years, a tremendous experience for me. Again, went to FDA meetings, went to board meetings, did transactions. I was the brand lead. I did all sorts of things and had just a really great experience of being in a very supportive culture where people want you to succeed and you can take risks and you can raise your hand to do things that in larger companies, you have whole departments who do these things. In a small entrepreneurial company, you raise your hand and say, hey, I'll take that. And you find your way. And so that was an incredible experience. After PTC, I was at Sarepta Therapeutics for just about a year and a half, a little bit more. And then I went to a company called Idera Pharmaceuticals and was doing some work there as the franchise lead for both the oncology and rare disease programs. And I got a call from Jeff Albers, who I had seen Blueprint, and they had just IPO'd and had this tremendous IPO. I knew Jeff from back in my days at Genzyme, hadn't really seen him for 10 years. And he was looking for a new chief business officer. And my first instinct was kind of kinases. What's new and innovative in kinases? I'd been working in nucleic acid therapeutics and exon skipping and kind of, I'd say more at technologies that were a little bit more kind of newer and innovative. And at Idera, we were trying to modulate the innate immune system with nucleic acid therapeutics with toll-like receptors, which is very cool. And here is Blueprint, which is small molecule platform, kinase inhibitors. I started to dig in and I thought, wow, like this is a really amazing, innovative angle on a tried and true technology and a real opportunity to potentially really build a company all the way through. Because if you have kind of tried and true small molecules where you're hitting genomic drivers that are causal in diseases, and you can do that in a way that kind of reforms the learnings of the past into something that's very potent and specific, that we can increase probability of success, we can shave timelines and move faster, and have an opportunity to really build an integrated business. And I saw that opportunity after having worked in numerous companies where we were had a lot of work to do on the technology, just to figure out how to modulate that biology and deliver those things, even from a dosing perspective, and really important work.
Yeah.
But it was going to take
more platform
more time.
development.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so it became exciting to me to think about that. And so I came from that point of Jeff asking me to take a look at it, and for all of a sudden me like really wanting that job. And luckily I got the role, and I started at Blueprint in 2016, so almost 10 years ago. And I started as Chief Business Officer. And indeed, we went through kind of many different changes at the company, but I moved to Chief Operating Officer after a couple of years, and then took on the CEO role almost 4 years ago in 2022. Yeah. So,
and you talked about changes along the way.
Yes.
The eventual product was quite different from where Blueprint started.
Absolutely.
Portfolio planning and decision-making is probably one of the hardest things we do. Deciding what to start, deciding what to stop.
Yes.
And deciding when to double down.
Yes.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the Blueprint portfolio and some of those decisions along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, when I started, I took out this slide and looked at what we thought our biggest value drivers were. And then where we ended, it was completely different. So, but I think the approach really helped us navigate that. So the idea was you need a portfolio to manage risk and to manage having multiple opportunities to create value for patients and to leverage the really great platform that had been built over a couple of years at Blueprint that was very prolific and still is prolific, and to leverage that and that science. But, and what I think is important is that what you think is going to happen is never what's going to happen.
Right.
But if you have a great team and you have kind of a set of guiding principles that you can keep consistent, although you can always evolve those as well, you will make your way through and you will find those areas where science meets medicine, meets value for patients. I also think it's important, we all say this, but to be data-driven. And if you're really squinting hard at your data to try to see what you hope to see, you should think about that.
Right.
And try to back yourself up. And that's hard because as entrepreneurial small companies that are really living and dying by inflection points. And in those early days, those are R&D inflection points, right? Did you get to the DC? Can you file the IND? Do you start to see pharmacodynamic impact, then clinical efficacy? I mean, all these points along the way are also external inflections. They enable you to fund your company, to keep the lights on, to hire more people. And so it's one of those things, it's actually harder to be data-driven than I think we'd all like to admit, because you're at the same time, there's an existential part of that.
Indeed.
But I think having a platform, which I know these days is harder for many companies to invest in platforms, gave us this optionality where we had opportunity cost. And we had opportunity cost early in our portfolio, which enabled us to, I think, make clearer-eyed and better decisions. We also took risks, and we went for some of these larger or more scaled patient populations that had medical needs, where that one-to-one it wasn't a monogenetic disease, right? Where we had a medicine or an investigational medicine that was designed to go after a certain mutation, but we thought had some activity maybe on a spectrum at higher doses across more mutations. And we went for some of that with the best information at the time. And we had things that worked exactly as we expected. We had a phase 3 failure in a study that we thought we were going to, obviously we wouldn't have done it if we didn't think it was going to turn out positive. We had opportunities present themselves because early in development, the medicine was even more potent. In AYVAKIT's a great example, was more potent than we expected at very low doses. And all of a sudden that opened up an opportunity to potentially not be in oncology. That potentially this tyrosine kinase inhibitor could be a chronic therapy for patients who have a disease like indolent systemic mastocytosis, which was never in the original plan. Right? So I think you have to both be resilient and ready to admit when something's not getting where it needs to get to, or when something turns out to not have a data set that justifies it moving forward, and open to the idea of, wow, this is a tyrosine kinase inhibitor, but it could be used chronically if it's potent enough and it has a clinical profile and a safety profile that matches that disease state. And that's a possibility as well. And so I think it's having all of those, both being open to the opportunities as well as being clear-eyed when something's not meeting the bar or the goal that you set out for, is super important. We say it, it's very hard to do.
It's very hard to do. And I think it comes back to what you said about team and how the team interacts. So permission-seeking, top-down.
Yes.
These can have an impact on these very difficult decisions, pivots,
Yes.
almost creativity that is required to see an opportunity that perhaps you didn't have in your mind originally.
Absolutely.
Right? So the team at Blueprint, you've talked about the culture.
Yes.
Are there specific things that you want to highlight about that culture and how it really got you through maybe those difficult moments where you had to kill programs or you had to pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the culture was critical. I mean, and I think what we strove for and constantly thought about, and at the most executive levels. I mean, we talked about it a lot at the executive team, was having a culture where there's trust, where there's debate and discussion, where there's a diversity of views around a table. Because again, working in this environment, if everyone agrees on something, I start to get worried, right? Like what you want is multiple people who are bringing perspectives and kind of advocating for their perspective, listening to their colleagues. I also think was part of our culture and is that we are not consensus-driven decision-making organization. It is, we need to move faster than that. And what you want is a single point decision maker where it's incumbent on that person to hear the debate, to hear the discussion, to get everything out of the people in the room, the stakeholders, the people with different sets of expertise, to integrate that and to decide what we're going to do.
Right.
And that should not be the same person all the time. It certainly shouldn't always be me as CEO. It shouldn't always be the chief medical officer. And we tried to push a lot of decisions to teams as well.
Right.
The teams are closest to these programs. They're closest to the business. They're closest to the patient advocates in that space and the KOLs in that space. And they really know what's going on.
Yeah.
And so you want to keep as much decision-making at the team level as possible. And then you want decision-making to be spread. And we had a discipline where executive team meetings and some of our other governance, if there was a decision to be made, there was a decision maker assigned ahead of time. So everyone knows who that decision maker is going to be. Very clear who is going to take the decision at the end of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what's also critical about that is having an environment that's not punitive. If things go wrong, people make mistakes, we call wrong decisions. That's okay. That's going to happen. And what's really important in those moments is that you don't look backward and be like, well, who did this and what happened and how did we get here?
Right.
Importantly, you say, okay, this is where we are. How are we going to solve it?
Correct.
Let's move forward. And if you have an environment like that, then people don't worry about being the decision maker because you're in a trusted environment. You move quickly, you make a decision, you pivot.
Yes.
You move, you pivot, you move, you pivot. And it's like, if that's kind of the environment, everyone expects that. And when bigger stuff goes wrong, it's still the same reaction. All right, this is where we are now. What are we going to do? How do we move forward? It doesn't mean that at times you shouldn't take a moment once you get through something to look back and be like, okay, can we just do something differently to not get there again?
What did we learn from...
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not about finding the person who took the decision and kind of wagging a finger at them.
Right.
Right? And I think that is all part and parcel of that same culture where you need to move quickly, you take risks, you do it as a team, you hear people out. And I think if you do those things, you will make your way through everything, through the kind of toughest times, through the best times, and you'll kind of treat all of that evenly and with the same approach and the same kind of tone and tenor, if you will. And so I'm really proud that, and we didn't get it right all the time. I think it's also part of it, is just talk about the moments where you're like, hey, we actually should have let the team make that decision.
Right.
And to say that out loud. Or to say, hey, I made a mistake.
Right.
I made mistakes.
Right. We all do.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think being able to be in an environment where people see their leaders saying that gives everyone permission to say, not to bury a mistake, not to sit on it, not to worry about it, but to surface it. Because if we make mistakes or if things go wrong or we didn't get to where we needed to get to, what you want to do is talk about it quickly, adjust, and move forward.
Right.
Right? And I think that's all part and parcel of a culture that's open, that's transparent, that values diversity and debate, and that values kind of clear and fast decision making.
This is awesome.
And again, you got to work at it all the time.
Yes.
It's never over.
Especially in our space.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes.
So, okay, let's fast forward at Blueprint then.
Yes.
So, as you pointed out, priorities on programs changed.
Yes.
You saw data that got you excited about a potential molecule that had broader application.
Yes.
Matching molecule to patient and to indication is also a very challenging thing.
Yes.
I think growing up at Merck, the idea of NPV analysis and thinking about commercial opportunity when you were still trying to figure out what the target was. And
Yeah.
there was a lot of when do we bring in that commercial assessment?
Yeah.
What's your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I like to have a commercial assessment or a commercial view early, and it shouldn't be the thing that dictates how you prioritize a program. That's a multifaceted decision.
Yeah.
I think when I think about Ayvakit in particular, which obviously became kind of the core of Blueprint, the first indication we ever got approval on in January of 2020 was a very rare type of GI stromal tumors, which is molecularly defined by this one mutation called PDGFR alpha. These patients had no therapies, Gleevec did not work for them, and it was a very small patient population, but it allowed us to earn our right to continue to move Ayvakit forward, because what we saw very quickly in the clinic was we had designed this investigational medicine to hit that mutation very hard. In the first few patients we treated, we saw tumors shrink significantly. And that data, although that would never be the size of an opportunity that would allow us to build a commercial team.
Right.
And we knew that. But that data enabled us to finance and move the program forward because it showed that the drug did what we designed it to do.
Indeed.
And when it does what you designed it to do, it has a profound impact. And then it enabled us to then have confidence to go after advanced systemic mastocytosis, homologous mutation. We were kind of like, it works here, it's definitely gonna work. To go after other types of GI stromal tumors. And then we saw that early data in advanced SM, and it opened up the idea that maybe we will have a clinical profile here that would be amenable to that much larger opportunity in the indolent systemic mastocytosis. Although that wasn't really well understood how big that opportunity was. So I feel like our view of what the ISM opportunity was at that point in time in 2017 is completely evolved as we developed Ayvakit and started to work in a therapeutic or in an area that had no medicines. And we see this over and over again in the rare disease space, where when there is no innovation, when there are no medicines and no drug development, there's not an imperative to identify these patients. There's not an imperative to get a correct diagnosis. Because you can't do anything.
Right.
And so sometimes there is that you have to build it to really understand the opportunity. And this is where kind of early commercial thinking, if you only use that as your only lens to think about how you're gonna move a program forward, you're likely not right.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be part of a bigger puzzle, but I think you still need to have the discipline to do it.
Right.
And have the insights around it, and also be clear-eyed on what it's gonna take to build your business. And one thing that I was really clear, our team was really clear on, is that in order to really fully integrate and become a commercial company, we needed an opportunity that was big enough that would enable us to do that successfully. And then if you have a smaller opportunity to begin with, you have to right-size your infrastructure investment around what that looks like. You have to be mindful of your operating expenses. And the other thing that we were very focused on at Blueprint is having a resilient organization. And for me as a leader there, it meant having an organization that could weather these ups and downs without having to kind of knee-jerk the organization around, do a lot of downsizing. And things happen. We have to get at points in time that has to happen. I'm very proud that at Blueprint we never did that. Even when we had a phase 3 failure, we just repurposed the team onto another program. We evolved from a targeted oncology company to a company that was really working in a very exciting biology with mast cell biology and more in I&I. And we had to move. We had a lot of people who were very passionate about working in oncology, and we had to kind of say, hey, we're moving in this direction because we think the science is incredibly interesting.
Yeah.
And we have an angle on this science and an experience here that others don't have, that we can bring differentiated and tremendous value here. But sometimes those types of evolutions are not for everybody, and that's okay.
Right.
But I think you have to be honest with the team about how you're thinking about that and why it's exciting, and that there's a business opportunity there, not just a scientific opportunity that's incredibly meaningful.
Yeah.
That we can bring a differentiated view to. But there's a lot of bringing an organization. You have to do it externally with your stakeholders, your investors, and everybody else. You've got to do it internally too.
Yeah.
And also give permission to people to say, hey, I really like working in lung cancer, and we're not working in lung cancer anymore, so I think I may move on, but that's fine.
Right.
And we'll always thank you so much for what you've contributed to this company, and you'll always be part of the Blueprint story.
Right.
And I think that kind of evolution and change, I think I answered your question, but it's really important.
Yes.
And you have to mix that business view with a scientific view. And at different points in time in the portfolio, one may be more important than the other, but it's not a formula.
No.
And it's not an algorithm.
And they follow the biology fundamentally of disease is so complex.
Yes.
When you find biology that you anticipated might work, but demonstrates itself in a clinical trial that it does work.
Yes.
As you point out, you kind of have to follow that biology.
Absolutely.
Right? Now, following the biology to a point where there is no commercial opportunity and re-examining that on a regular basis.
Yes.
As you start to uncover more applications potentially of that biology. And if the application's narrow, I think, as you point out, we're still running a business. You have to keep the lights on and so on. And if it doesn't actually match, one might have to step away. But I found often when you uncover biology in this complex world that we live in, where there is a loud signal.
Yes.
I was at Merck when Keytruda was first coming to light.
What a story, right?
Yeah, that kind of loud biology says we found a way to intercede in pathophysiology here. How many more ways can we apply that biology? And it sounds like that was the journey.
Absolutely. And what I think is so interesting is that as you kind of forward integrate and you have some success and you start to have a commercial footprint in a commercial medicine, you also start to evolve from being assessed on your R&D metrics to being assessed on financial metrics.
Correct.
And then I think in that moment, what I saw even at Blueprint, there's this view of operating leverage. And there's this view of like, well, then what you're doing in discovery needs to line up with kind of what you have from a commercial perspective. And what I say at Blueprint is, of course, I mean, there's a natural flywheel there, right? You're in doctors' offices across the world, and there's really interesting innovation that can come from that, like interesting targets, interesting disease states that those treating physicians who you're having broad conversations with have patients be like, hey, you guys may be able to help. Like, this is our wild type KIT program. Came out of all the discussions we're having with the allergy immunology community around our mutated KIT program. And it's kind of like, they're like, if you guys are so good at KIT, can you help us with all these other patients? And it's like, well, that's really interesting. Of course, we brought that back in discovery and we had Blue 808 come out. And we were also doing things that had nothing to do. Because to that point, a great biological target that you think you can modulate are not a dime a dozen. And you shouldn't leave them on the cutting floor just because it may not be perfectly synergistic with what you've already forward built. Or just because it may be in a disease state or disease area that you don't have a lot of expertise in. If people had asked me when I joined Blueprint Medicines in 2016, if we'd be selling to allergy, immunology, and dermatology, I would have said you were crazy. But like that's where our program took us. And we were able to do it very successfully because if you have time, you can build the capabilities. You don't have to have them in place. So if you have some early program and some really interesting science that is not synergistic with your forward infrastructure, you've got 10 years to figure that out. You can build it over time. And so I think sometimes people start to get almost too clever and think that targets are kind of fungible. And it's like, well, we're not going to go after those because that's not where our commercial focus is. But of course, as everything we do, it's intention. Operating leverage is important. Being able to maximize your infrastructure is important, both in discovery, development, and in commercial. And so you have to constantly be kind of thinking about these tensions, but going after really interesting innovation that could in the future take you into all different places. That's okay. And how you figure out how to balance that, and I feel like my job as CEO was very much about how do I allocate capital? How do we as a team allocate capital? Where are our priorities? 80% of our capital is allocated to things that were being currently valued, by our investors and the market and really understood and visible. 20% were in things that were not, when people did not know what we were doing. And I think that was a good balance. And I think that that's something that our external stakeholders could say, okay, we get that. And that feels like a good way of allocating capital and creating near-term value while planting the seeds for the future, right? But that's a very hard thing to do. And it's hard to kind of continue to build your forward infrastructure while also maintaining kind of the investments in that early discovery science. And you see people at times have to make trade-off decisions. I think we were lucky to grow up as a company in a time frame where capital access was pretty good. And I don't take that for granted. And we were able to continue to finance the company and find resources to be able to develop it.
So let's talk then about the Blueprint acquisition.
Yes.
But I also want to pick up on what you were just describing about the environment at the time where Blueprint was really in these late-stage trials. And where we are today, we're sitting here in Boston, 2025 feels like a really different environment to 2020.
Very much.
So maybe let's talk about the acquisition,
Yes,
and
sure.
then let's talk about 2025 and beyond.
Yeah. So from the acquisition perspective, I mean, it's kind of the tried and true story, which is where we were having business development conversations. We look at BLU-808, which is the wild-type KIT inhibitor that we are moving into clinical trials, and it's potentially incredibly exciting. It really could impact just a tremendous number of diseases across the allergy, immunology, and dermatology spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
One of our investors had actually called it a potential oral Dupixent.
Okay.
I mean, Dupixent is incredible medicine.
Indeed.
Incredible medicine. So even if you get a fraction of that type of impact on patients, it'd be amazing, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were part of my job as CEO, and we did this all along at Blueprint. I mean, we raised almost $2 billion in business development over the course of my time there, was always to be talking to large pharmaceutical companies about our whole portfolio.
Yes.
Because we were so fortunate to have an incredibly productive discovery team. And at many, many points in time, we couldn't take everything forward. And we had to make decisions around what did we want to be great at and own and operate, and where should we take our innovation and partner with people who are great at that.
Exactly.
I mean, we had to constantly be making those decisions, which was wonderful because it also brought capital into the company. Mm-hmm. We did all of those transactions were based on corporate strategy, but brought resources in that were very important to us as well. And so I think from back in those early days that we talked about, I love transactions. I think we work in an ecosystem. I think you have to be humble about what you're really good at, and you have to be really clever to leverage those around us who are doing incredible things,
yes,
who can take part of that innovation and do more with it than you could ever do. Right?
Indeed. Absolutely.
And so we're always having conversations across our whole portfolio, even things we never wanted to partner, but just knowing who was interested in what and where there's expertise. BLU-808 became one of these things that a number of companies, larger companies, were potentially interested in partnering with us on. We were not looking to partner it in the next couple years, but we could imagine a future if it continued to be successful, where you want to run a number of trials in parallel across numerous disease states, across dermatology, allergy, immunology, potentially others. And so it could become big. And so when you want to do that deal, you need to have conversations for a year and a half, 2 years leading into by the time you may actually want, right? So that was part of the conversation with Sanofi, as well as some others. And then through that conversation, they started to talk to us a little bit more about AYVAKIT, and because obviously there's a synergy between BLU-808 and AYVAKIT, and then it really evolved into interest more broadly, and interest in our mast cell expertise broadly, and how mast cell biology is not something that has been able to be kind of leveraged into innovative therapeutic options. And we did that with AYVAKIT, and we felt that we had a view of it that could be differentiated for other types of disease states where mast cells play. So, and it really evolved from there. And it came to a place where when they were interested in the whole company, we started to have that conversation. And one of the things that really distinguished Sanofi from others is that I think Paul and his team had put out a view that they believe, and they have built a pipeline to be world leaders in immunology by 2030.
Yes.
And I think our portfolio fit perfectly with that vision. And importantly, they wanted the team. And that mattered a lot to me.
Yes.
We have a great team.
Yep.
Our team at Blueprint continues to be an incredible team who are just passionate, patient-focused, and are driving a really incredible business. And I think Sanofi's current team is based around Dupixent, as we just said, like just legendary medicine, but it's in partnership with another company. And they needed independent infrastructure to bring their wholly owned portfolio forward.
Got it.
And so both AYVAKIT and 808, plus other things we were doing, just dropped right into that. They wanted a team, and they were going to bring that team now has the opportunity to be part of Sanofi's innovation in the pipeline they have in immunology, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, that really, the kind of the stars aligned on that. And it became something that felt like it was in the best interest of our shareholders, of course, and then also our employees.
I think it's a wonderful example of innovation, focus, and expertise living in a company like Blueprint in a way that perhaps doesn't exist in a big pharma.
Yes.
And there's a perfect synergy. You described partnering assets at some point because the expertise resided in the large pharma. And we've done that a lot as well, where we could take it forward, but actually to be fair to the drug and to be fair to the patients, actually it's better off in the hands of others.
Absolutely.
But in this case, you're describing that Blueprint essentially had built some expertise that didn't reside elsewhere, and that was part of the attraction in addition to the drug. That's pretty, I think, interesting when we're thinking about the role of pharma and biotech and that interplay between the two.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think it's wonderful that pharma recognizes that. And we've seen it now a number of transactions this year where clearly that expertise and is part of the whole value proposition to the pharmaceutical company, and where they will bring that expertise and value the people around it, and hopefully continue to be able to expand it further than we can, which they, with their global reach and their resource, they're going to be able to, I know Ayvakit is going to get to more patients faster internationally than we are.
Right.
As well as then just how to bring mast cell biology and therapeutics around it, not just with Ayvakit, but with, I hope to see, and I will obviously be watching more and more things come through, because I do think that biology is a profound place to look to modulate as you think about really impacting outcomes for patients.
Yeah. Well, we often talk about the fact that there are tens of thousands of diseases that are driven by particular target cells, particular pathways, and we've really only scratched the surface. So when we talk about 2025 and looking forward, we do have there's a moment going on, right?
Yes, there is.
There's a funding moment.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
But there's also this question of where do we go next, right?
Yeah.
Best in class is challenging these days because there's so much to choose from for big pharma.
Yes.
So that kind of pushes us towards innovation, novelty, deep understanding of biology. What's your prediction for the next 5-10 years for biotech?
Yes, to your point, I think we've been in a moment the last few years, right? It's been a tough time for biotech, and that is kind of continued. We at moments we think we see lights at the end of the tunnel, although I would say 2025 still a difficult year, but we're seeing a lot of innovation get rewarded, and that's a really important part of the ecosystem. So one thing I love about this industry is just given our probabilities of success, which are very well understood and well known, we tend to be optimists, because I think if you're going to work in biotech, you have to believe you can bend the curve.
Yes.
Right? And you have to believe in investing in really important and really exciting technology that has a lot of unknowns around. And your job is to kind of one by one kind of unclick that right? And I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
So when I think forward, so first I'm very optimistic about where we are as an industry. And we will make our way through these times. When I think forward, one of the things I'm really excited about is that intersection of biology and technology. And I know this is what you do day in and day out, which I think is super, super exciting. But just as we think about synthetic biology and the opportunity for biological systems to become more programmable, I really do believe that, and I know right now cell and gene therapies and also a lot of stuff is not getting kind of recognized or funded in certain ways. I think that is just a moment in time. And I get that. Like our investor partners, who are all part of our important ecosystem, they've had a couple hard years too. So we all need to manage portfolios and have things where we're swinging for the fences and things where, we're kind of hitting singles and doubles, right? And we have to do that inside our own companies.
Indeed.
But I really do believe that these are going to be the things that are going to be the most important step changes in human health over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And so as I think about my own time, I'm excited to get more involved in some of that work. It is, as much as I said, one of the value propositions for me around Blueprint was that idea that if we had more tried and true technology, you could really have the opportunity to build a full company.
Yeah.
I think some of these technologies are really just started.
Oh, yeah.
Just started to have impact. And sure, there's things we need to deal with and we need to get better at, but it is going to be profound what they can do when you intersect technology with biology and you think about that opportunity to have kind of programmable biology. I mean, we are going to just see tremendous, tremendous impacts that I think it's hard to even fathom at this moment.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of this right now with cell therapy, just unbelievable response rates, right? Cures.
I mean, and that's a word we don't use lightly, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
The supply chain and some of the pieces, which is how do you bring this to patients at scale, I think we'll solve it.
We are, and I think we are. There are companies solving it.
Yeah.
There are companies out there who are doing tremendous work on that right now.
So we are running fast out of time.
Yes,
I could talk to you for hours.
I know this has been wonderful. I feel the same. Yes.
So let's talk about you.
Yes.
In the closing moments here, tell us about Kate,
Sure.
what you do to relax,
Yeah.
some of your favorite books, anything that sort of inspires you on this journey
Yes.
as a professional in the biotech industry.
Yeah, well, thank you. I left Blueprint at the end of July. So I'm figuring out what I need to do to relax. I feel like I loved being part of, not just Blueprint, Genzyme and PTC and Sarepta and Idera and all the companies I've had an opportunity to be a part of. It's been such a rewarding experience for me to be part of incredible teams with such smart people who are optimistic. It's such a privilege to be part of an industry where you're going to be smarter in December than you were in January.
Indeed.
And I just like, what an incredible place to be able to constantly spend your time. I mean, and I don't think many in other industries can say that necessarily.
We're learning and solving.
All the
and
time.
solving.
And and we have an imperative to out-innovate ourselves and to continue to build and to build that momentum. And I think that that's just a tremendous place to be. So I will, of course, always want to be part of this ecosystem. During my time at Blueprint, I had both my children. So I have 2 young boys who are 7 and 9. So this is a great time for me to focus a little bit more on them and have some more time and capacity for them. I am definitely reading more. I am looking forward to traveling and spending more time being able to travel and spend time with my husband, who is a professor at Harvard and just really serendipitously has a sabbatical next year in 2026.
Oh, wonderful.
So we are actually, as a family, going to be in Europe for 3 months in the spring and really take advantage of some of these things. And I'm looking forward to trying to be part of some of these organizations that are solving some of these things around cell therapy. And I actually may have something to talk about that in the near future here. Or in being an advisor, I'm very passionate about supporting women in leadership roles. And one of the things I think at Blueprint that really distinguishes our executive team was 50% women and men. Our board is 30% women. And I really think that was part of why we were so successful. It's not just gender diversity, but just having a diversity of experiences and perspectives around the table was absolutely part of our success. And I want to continue to be part of supporting people in their own leadership journeys on that. And so I feel like there's a lot I can continue to do to be part of, I think, that next 10 years, which I'm really excited about, to spend time with my family, to figure out what I like to do for. I've been so invested in this industry and building companies that I think I have now a little bit of time to think about, like, what are some things that I want to kind of cultivate for myself. And so that's kind of a work in progress. Maybe I'll check back in with you in a year or so.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing the update.
Yes, thank you.
Well, Kate, thank you so much.
Yes.
I think that a lot of folks in the industry look at Blueprint as an iconic story, and you were right there at the helm from very early on. We're very excited to see and hear what happens next in your career journey.
Thank you very much. It has been a privilege to be here. I am so grateful for the journey at Blueprint and for the team that I worked with there. And I know they're going to continue to do a tremendous job. So
Great.
Yes.
We'll see you soon.
yes, thank you.